going to start right at 9, so I'm actually talking to the internet. Went live. I'm trying to learn if I can mute it, or I really wish I figured out the way loading or like please wait screens work. I'm still figuring it all out. Okay.
We'll know by Monday.
We will know by Monday. 1 week of these things in, and I still don't know how to use the damn technology. All right. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Internet universe. Hope everyone finds themselves well on this beautiful Friday morning. Thank you for joining me for this talk. I wanted to finish off the week on a little bit of a challenge. And I don't think these are two challenging topics, mindfulness and embodiment, to necessarily talk about because they are entirely cliche and ubiquitous at this point. I feel like everyone's heard somebody talk about the term mindfulness, and everyone's heard somebody talk about the word embodiment, maybe less embodiment, more mindfulness. But I wanted to kind of talk about them from my own standpoint. So these are technologies. They're not something that anybody can own. They're not something outside of us. They're something that comes from us. So the tendency, I think, today, especially with concepts like this, because if someone's teaching you about mindfulness or embodiment, they're either going to be some professional consultant or a therapist or monk or some professional who is going to express their unique system or their unique way of talking about it, right? And the reason that exists is because everybody wants to monetize it. Everybody wants to own it. But these things are as old as humans because they are about the technologies of being human. And because no one can own these materials, I want to very much always talk about these things like they are yours to take control of and to master and to use in your own life as you live your life. And so teaching about them is more often than not about you than it is about me. Mindfulness, just to give some basic, kind of definitions, mindfulness can be, expressed as a calm awareness and acceptance of what's happening, what we're thinking. For me, embodiment is an awareness and acceptance of what we are expressing. I'll get to use this term, expressing through our body being. I love that word, or hyphen. I stole it from a pretty interesting author. And then there's kind of the, more practical definitions. But the way that we have used this word embodiment in the past, I think is helpful for us. Something can be the living embodiment of something. When someone is the living embodiment of, the definition I saw of vitality, right? Like, what's that look like? What's that person look like? The living embodiment of vitality, the living embodiment of moping, the living embodiment of ease. I think when we kind of take it into that framework, it becomes a little easier for us to maybe use the word for ourselves in sentences and in our own lives. And mindfulness, very much is related to what am I thinking about? What's happening around me? What am I doing at this exact moment? A lot of this comes down to me, or for me, as this concept that we all have a relationship to these days, which is multitasking. And I think we all have this tendency to try to multitask as much as possible, myself included. Um, and there is a belief that we can do lots of things all at once. But ultimately, what we're always doing is task switching. Maybe we're task switching very effectively, and maybe we're receiving passively feedback while we're giving out some feedback, right? So anybody who's ever been like a stenographer or something like that, they're taking something in and then they're expressing it through their fingers, right? So we can be receiving lots of stimulus and we can be giving out stimulus, but we usually can't be doing at one time more than one thing. So I can't be typing something, reading something, thinking about something else, and having a conversation with somebody else all at one time. But I can skillfully take in stimulus and give out stimulus, right? Or else, situational awareness wouldn't be very useful, right? If I could only run and not be aware of what's going on around me, then I wouldn't necessarily be a very good runner. So we have this kind of relationship to multitasking and task switching, which can be optimized over time. Mindfulness for me is something that was kind of taught to me in some interesting contexts, right? I didn't just learn it in a monastery. I didn't just learn it in a classroom. I learned it in a dojo, in a martial arts school. I learned about it from a lot of folks who were veterans or law enforcement professionals. Um, and so I have a specific relationship to it for myself, but my teachers had their specific relationship to it, and their relationship to it influenced my relationship to it. And the study I've done since learning about it, right? And I started meditating when I was 10 years old, so 25 years ago. And I've developed my own relationship to this material over time. But it's important to just kind of remember this is effectively our natural state of being. An embodied mindfulness is being fully aware of our subjective self and the surroundings, um, my thought, my word, my deed. I'm embracing all of it at once. And from this centered, relaxed, calm, accepting place, I'm embracing what is in this moment. So I want to talk about removing mindfulness and embodiment from this kind of corporate consultant culture and taking it to a lot of the reason that we know about it in the West, right? Which is it does come to us from Buddhism. It does come to us from um, especially Zen Buddhism in the West is something that really got a lot of play around the concept of mindfulness. I have a number of books, but Beginner's Mind, Zen Mind, or Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind is a great kind of introductory text by Suzuki Roshi, who kind of enters us into the paradox of meditation and mindfulness. And I think paradox is so important when embracing mindfulness practice. But again, my relationship comes to it from these guys, all for the most part guys, who had gone to war and learned about this stuff in the context of people's lives depend on my mindfulness, right? So when my teacher would see me make a mistake and just say mindfulness, and I would be like, inside I would say, yeah, I understand. Because the truth of that is likely that that person had a moment when they could recall somebody dying as a result of not embracing mindfulness. On a job site, construction site, on the highway, in our cars, mindfulness takes on very high stakes. We like to pretend while we're all healthy and living that there's no situations we'll ever find ourselves in that are dangerous. But a construction worker is one of the most dangerous jobs in America. If I drop the wrong thing from a height and it lands on my friend, I kill him. If I am not paying full attention to my surroundings and I fall off a roof, maybe I die. There are consequences to our actions, and mindfulness is about fully embracing awareness. I believe just like a lot of the things that we talk about with these technologies of humanity, they emerged from our need to survive. They evolved from our time hunting, our time, in particular, persistence hunting, tracking, being aware of all the details, and allowing ourselves to viscerally enter a space, That's where that embodiment piece of mindfulness comes in, right? Is that it's not separate from my awareness of something, but I'm viscerally connecting to my surroundings and my environment. I'm not just separate from my environment as a placid observer, right? Which is effectively what mindfulness is teaching us how to do, to become a dispassionate observer, to embrace the observer effect, right? I'm sure I'll talk about that in future videos, the observer effect and all of its fun stuff. But to be the observer of the observer effect without necessarily doing anything, needing to do anything, but just fully being aware and accepting. Embodiment is much more about, when we're in a pool of water, where that's room temperature, where does my body end and the water begin, right? Embodiment can kind of be understood that way. Where is the separation between me, the observer, and me, the part that's in the environment around me? And how can I embrace that maybe that separation between me and my environment is not as big as I'd like to think? That maybe I really am the environment that I'm in. So for me, that piece is extremely important for us all to remember, right? Is that these are technologies for us to embrace in our own lives. They inherently connect us to the consequences of our actions in a way which allow us to really keep each other and ourselves safe if we're doing it right. And that they are about connection to what is occurring around us. We can kind of talk about this. What I'd like to talk about this as is, at least for me, embodiment and mindfulness can allow us to bring something into being, right? We can take it from this mental realm. One of my teachers really likes to talk about this idea that we all live our lives from the neck up. None of us really fully embrace this idea that like we are the other two centers as well, right? That we are the body, we are the heart, and we are the mind. All the centers have to be in full alignment in order to act optimally. And we can bring something that is in our minds, in our hearts, and in our bodies into being through this embodiment. So there's an aspect of that which is great, and then there's an aspect of that that can really be taken advantage of, that can really be exploited by the people who are exploiting us, right? And I don't mean that in a good or a bad way necessarily, but we all get paid to do a job. And I think this is where the challenge can become really important for us to examine in our own lives. Because so often these days, corporate consultants are talking about mindfulness and embodiment and all of that sort of stuff. There's this angle of this will make you a better employee, and so it'll make you more productive. And if you're more productive, then I'll be able to extract more value from you. And so from that framework, it becomes much less about you and your life and much more about your value to someone else, right? And so this is going to be where we start to descend into the shadow aspects of this topic, which is, if I resent my own mindfulness, if I resent my own embodiment because they're being taken advantage of, when I come home and I sit down on the couch and I turn on that TV or those video games or whatever, I'm trying to shut it off. I'm trying to shut the whole thing down. I'm trying to say, I don't want to. I don't want to be aware. I don't want conscious acceptance of what is. I want to be somewhere else. I want fantasy. That's fine. That is fine. In and of itself, totally fine. We're going to actually talk a lot about why that's fine and how that can be so important for each person. But if we've given everything we have, all of our pure focus and attention and mindfulness and embodiment to someone who wants to take it all from us, those things become easy to resent. And so then the people who want stuff from us in our personal lives can then become easy to resent as well. Because, hey, you're not paying me to be aware. I'm just here, okay? I don't owe you anything. And that relationship to resentment of these things and the hyper activity that our modern society forces us to engage in essentially causes us to never be still. Effectively saying, my mindfulness is only useful if I can make it productive. My embodiment is only useful if I can make it productive. What can I do with these breaths? What can I do with my thoughts? What can I do with my body? Forcing us to leave the true nature of where these technologies emerge from, right? Which is a constant state of being. A constant state of being. Can I be with my breath? Can I be with my stillness? Can I be with my silence? Do I not need to rush to create a new note? Someone brought that in, and I was reminded of how we learn kata, right? And that there's action, 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 and then calm, silence, stillness. Both still have full presence. Both still have full power. But one is active and one is still. And so for me, as effectively spiritual dissident, someone who perceives the act of being as more important than the act of doing, I don't want to make you just more productive. I don't want you to just take this technology and say, I can get more paperwork done today if I'm mindful. Because I'm effectively giving you a stick to hit yourself with. And as I have told clients and my partner, I'm not in the business of helping people hurt themselves. I'm not in the business of helping people hurt themselves. So I want us to be aware of that, and we're going to go much deeper into how to use these technologies. Today is more a topic of discussion. So obviously, I hope everybody's okay with me speaking a little bit more in generalities. So I'm going to jump into the real problem of these technologies. The trouble becomes trauma. Trauma is, as nearest I can tell, the only trouble we have in our human experience. When something so bad or a series of things so bad happen to us that we have trouble separating this moment from that moment. And that moment becomes so present in our awareness and in our narrative and in our understanding of reality that it is reality, even though I'm over here experiencing reality somewhere else. When does mindfulness become re-traumatization? And when does embodiment become trauma response? Those things for me are much more interesting now, coming into my own relationship with those technologies, right? Is how do they go wrong? Everybody likes to think mindfulness can only be right. Embodiment can only be right. It's not. It isn't. Anybody who's ever seen someone go through a full trauma response will tell you that they have trouble, or anybody who's ever gone through a trauma response, right, will be able to tell you, I can't separate out that moment from this moment. The trick is not always to go in, right? Because then I'm just effectively re-traumatizing myself. I haven't been able to embrace the truth of the moment without embracing the truth of what has formed this moment, right? Because for some of us, when we've experienced such a horrifically traumatic break from reality, it severs the reality of what was as a continuity. The pre-traumatic event and the post-traumatic event is like a schism in the universe. And we now are living in the post-traumatic world. And this is the part that I think especially the New Agey Love and Light crew doesn't really want to talk about. We don't really want to go deep into the fact that emotions are not always pleasant. Truth is not always kind. And if we pigeonhole ourselves into our possible responses, or the only acceptable responses are the ones that make other people feel okay, and our responses are only the ones that paint ourselves in a positive light. I just want to be viewed a certain way. So I'm going to make sure that I only express these sorts of truths. When you experience a truth that is so messed up, some of us have profound fear of death. Anybody who's going to engage in mindfulness is going to come up against that truth. I talked about it in one of my first videos, right? This gateway of death. I'll bring it back in because it is the omnipresent friend that sits over our shoulder saying, tick tock, tick tock. If we are freaked out about that today and that's bothering us, and we just, I'm being mindful, but I'm being really mindful of something messed up constantly, all I'm doing is traumatizing myself. All I'm doing is forcing myself into this cycle of pain and fear. And we have to be able to shut it off, right? We have to be able to say, nope, click. I'm not going to embrace that anymore. I'm going to look at the paper, look at the paper, look at the paper, look at the paper. The paper is real. The paper is real, right? This is a thing. And so this is where the embodiment and the mindfulness thing can help each other to spiral ourselves out of the traps. What happens if all I can embody is pain? That doesn't sound very positive to me. I once was talking to a cancer patient, and I've heard this reported from a bunch of other patients of chronic pain. I'm just so bored of the pain. Imagine that relationship to pain. Imagine that level of constant bombardment of negative feedback. Why would I tell anybody to embody that? Why? What in good God's name am I telling that person to do? Ultimately, yes, I do believe mindfulness and embodiment are the answer, but they're not the only answer. They're not the only way to move through. So this is where our embracing of these technologies work, but they can work too well sometimes. They can work so well that they force us into realities that are deeply unpleasant, and we have to be able to process and move through and work through those unpleasant components. And this is where a good teacher, a good guide, right? That's the word I prefer at this point. Anybody who's ever studied the Japanese language and knows the word sensei does not mean teacher, but one who has gone before, is extremely important. Having the guide along the path for us usually gives us access to someone who has empathy for us, right? And can let us off our own hook. One of my teachers used to say, my job isn't to teach my apprentices. My job is to make sure my apprentices don't hurt themselves. These technologies, because we apply, and I'm going to take it back to what we were talking about yesterday with joyful discipline, because we just apply discipline in this culture as a flagellation. I say, no, I'm going to be mindful every goddamn day, even if it hurts. And we can whoop our own asses so hard with these concepts of mindfulness and embodiment, of pain and stress and trauma, that we don't allow ourselves to embody joy. And we don't allow ourselves to rest and accept calm, whole totality of ourselves as safe, as peaceful, because we're always looking to leverage. I got to make this useful or else it's just a waste of my time. I got to make it effective or else I'm not being productive. And if I'm not being productive, then I'm being bad. These technologies are separate. These technologies are yours. These technologies are something you always have access to. And so because of that, you can choose not to use them or you can choose to use them. Today, is mindfulness going to serve you? Probably. Is embodiment going to serve you? Probably. But how it serves you is about you, is about how you choose to embrace it. Are you going to embrace mindfulness and embodiment in your personal relationships? Or are you going to embrace it in only your capacity to get more work done today? Are you going to embrace mindfulness and embodiment in your ability to fully embrace the parasympathetic nervous system and relaxation response? Or are you only going to use it because you gotta get this goddamn thing done in this timeline that somebody else gave to you? Are you going to allow yourself off the hook of the outside world and allow yourself access to the inner world, the inner safety, the inner peace that these technologies are meant to bring us into access with, or into relationship with? Relationship to each other, relationship to self, and relationship to the environment around us is what these technologies are about. Everything is about relationship. You are not separate from, you are a product of, and a shaper and a creator of your outside world. We do that through consciously shaping and engaging with and being in relationship to our inner world. So, if there's anything I want to leave us with today, it is, how can mindfulness and embodiment be the two sides of this coin of relating and being in relationship to the world around us? How is it that we want to be in relationship to the world around us? And how is it that we can allow the world around us to be in relationship to us? If we get caught in unkind or unwell truths, if we get caught in traumatic events and all of that, it is my hope that all of us will be able to find the spirals out, find the guides through, and find access to greater and greater depths of self love and empathy for others through this practice, through this work. Remember, it's not always going to be comfortable. It doesn't always have to be comfortable. That's okay. But we never want to hurt ourselves. We never want to attack ourselves. We never want to abuse ourselves in this process. And so, from this place of self love, from this place of self care, from this place of self efficacy, I hope that you are able to use and enter into a relationship with mindfulness and embodiment today and every day, because this is your life. This is your one life. And so I wish you all a beautiful weekend. I'm going to come back to my videos on Monday. I'm going to take the weekend off and go hike in the mountains. So I thank you all for joining me. If you've made it this far, as always, you beautiful, crazy people, thank you. And yeah, see you soon. Be well.